Okay, no kidding. This is like take 5. Are you ready? Are you ready? I'm ready. Let's do this. Hey there, folks. How you doing today? Welcome back to the channel. Please bear with the background racket. There's a bunch of it going on out there right now. You're going to hear some stuff in the background. Let's not let it detract from what we have going here today, and that is, this is part 4, technically like part 4.5 of our series on the Ruger M77 Hawkeye Guide Gun in 30-06. Check out this video on the Caldwell lead sled to see more on this rifle. We started this series like 2 months ago. There's a list of the other videos in the series. It's been extremely popular. A lot of y'all have been asking for more on this. So here is part 4, which, spoiler alert, if you didn't see the $20 bill sticking out of there, right there, we have free floated and glass bedded the action between now and the last time you saw this thing. But there's much more to it than that. I'm going to cover it here in detail in just a moment. I cannot believe how popular this series has been. I'm humbled by all of the attention that you people have paid to this project. I've taken it extremely seriously, and I'm hoping that by following the steps that I have followed throughout this endeavor, that some of y'all will glean some good information out of this. I am by no means an expert at hammering these things out, but I do have a pretty good idea of how to fix things following a methodology. I've made it work in the past on several of these other projects that you see. So thank you if you've suffered through the other portions of this video series prior to this one. I want to backtrack just a little bit, and then I'm going to lay the hammer down on something super cool that happened a little over a week ago here on the channel. Took this rifle out to the range the first time. The groups were all over the place. Just about everything we tried to shoot through it was 2 minute of angle or greater. Just no consistency. There was a lot of stringing and just wide open groups. I came back a little bit disheartened at all the time and effort and money spent on the project and it just not being any good. I knew there were things that I could do to make it better. I just didn't feel like in 2024, in the day of CNC machining, that I should be having to spend so much time fixing what is realistically, this is a flagship rifle for the company. This is one of their higher end guns. MSRP on this rifle is like $1659, $1679, something like that. I think it's $1659. You know, we got a fairly good piece of glass on it, and for what it is, you really would have expected it to shoot just a little better right out of the box, but it didn't. So now what? Well, I knew there was a process I wanted to follow, but I also wanted to start with some of the easy stuff first and see if maybe that might have something to do with it. In part 1, I kind of indicated that maybe the muzzle brake might have something to do with it. In part 2, we took it back to the range and obtained a ton of data, shooting it with the factory muzzle brake, the factory muzzle weight, as well as the factory thread protector, to see what kind of changes we got from one to the next at the range with the rifle. That was a tedious, time-consuming, and very expensive project. Moving on from there, something else that had come up many times was maybe you got a bad scope. So we swapped the scope off of this rifle. We lapped the rings, the factory Ruger rings. We swapped the scope out for a known good scope. We put this scope on another rifle. We took them out and we tested them side by side. We made the determination that there was nothing wrong with this scope, and we put it back on here. So we kind of ruled out the scope being a problem, and that left us with part 4 of the video series, which naturally was going to be floating the forend and glass bedding the action. There's a lot to that, but I'm going to back up once again just a little bit and say that in the comment section in the first 3 videos in this series, time and again, several of you reached out and said, those Ruger factory rings are junk. Get a good set of rings. A few folks recommended worn rings, but by far and large, the most persistent comment in the comment section concerning rings was, get a set of Alaska Arms rings, get a set of Alaska Arms rings. So I reached out to Alaska Arms, told them what I was going with, and asked them if they thought a set of their rings might help. I spent a good amount of time on the phone that day with Morris Milani. He is the proprietor of Alaska Arms LLC. He was busy that day, but he stopped what he was doing and spent quite a bit of time just helping me to structure a plan for what we were going to do with the rifle. Well, Morris actually went back and he watched the videos in the series that I had on the rifle so that he could better understand what it was I was working with. Next thing I know, he's calling me up telling me, hey man, I'm going to send you a set of my rings to try out on there. Now you'll notice they're not on there yet. Hear me out. That's coming in the next portion of our video series on this rifle. He told me he was sending me a set of rings. I was floored. I couldn't believe he was going to do that, but you know, grateful at all the time and effort he spent on the phone with me, helping me to sort out what needed to be done here. About a week later, he called me up and told me that he was coming to Texas at the end of September and asked me if I wanted him to come by and take a look at my rifle. Yeah. So I got back with him right away. I told him, I said, hey man, not sure if you know how big Texas is driving across it, but we might not be just down the road from you. He said, nah, I already checked it out. You're only 190 miles out of my way. Folks, that was one way. He was up in Dallas. We're down by Houston. He drove down here, spent 2 days with us. We had a great time. Him and his wife are wonderful people, lovely, lovely people, just good human beings. And we had a good time of fellowship. And he got with me and we worked through the wood on this rifle and we got it squared away. Now, prior to that, I had already had the rifle out of the action. I had already messed around with it a couple of times, just trying to figure out what was going on with it. This Green Mountain laminate stock that's on this rifle is a hot piece of garbage. It is so out of spec, it isn't even funny. The folks over at Ruger had reached out to me after the first video and offered to fix the rifle for me. But I had already been talking to Morris at that time, and I kind of wanted to go through the process, especially since they're the ones that sent the rifle out in this kind of shape to begin with. I really wanted to figure it out for myself rather than sending it back to them and hoping that they get it right. I'm going to show you in depth some of the issues that we had with this stock. For starters, the way I received it, and I purchased the rifle new back this past spring, the way I received it, the action screws were kind of sort of torqued to spec. And the only way that was possible was by the use of some cardstock, like business card material shims that had been tucked up between the floor plate and the bottom of the inlet on the stock. I actually have one of those right here. I'll put a close-up of that. This was in the rifle from the factory. I think I have a picture somewhere that shows some of the paper stuck to the inside of the stock. Without those paper shims in place, you couldn't even get the magazine plate to close. The rear screw was sticking so far up through the action that the bolt wouldn't open properly without the shims. And if you look at the top of the stock, you'll see that it was pressing hard. The barrel was pressing hard on the stock on the left side at the muzzle end of the forend, and it was pressed tight on the right side at the chamber end. Now, granted, it's not a real long forend, you know. So there was some twist going on to the forend. The inletting on the stock was really bad. There were just some like sawdust and debris sticking up from whoever routed out the action spots in the stock. And it was just really kind of crummy. So I knew that was something that was going to have to be taken care of. Morris came down and he gave me some pointers on how to do that. Now there's tons of videos online of how to bed a stock. We're not actually doing any gunsmithing or anything in this video. We're just kind of talking about it. But if you look here, you'll see that we painted the bottom of the action with some blue oil paint. And when we stuck it back down inside the stock, I was surprised at how poor the fitting was in relation to what parts of the gun were actually touching the wood. On that note, and something I didn't mention earlier, but it was a relevant thing, the bolt release, the little lever on the side of the action that you pull out to take the bolt out of the action, was firmly wedged against the wood. And with the screws torqued down, you couldn't pull that out without some kind of tool in your hand you could grab it with and kind of pull it out. I've actually got a list here of stuff that was wrong with the stock. Okay, so the fore end was twisted. We talked about that. We actually, after the relief cuts were made inside the fore end where the material was removed to free float it, it continued to press and twist on the barrel. So we fixed that. There's a portion of the bottom of the fore end that was removed so that some reinforcement could be put in there with the bedding, and now it seems to be pretty good. The rear action screw sticking up, we talked about that. The floor plate down on the bottom, I'll put up pictures here so you can see what I'm talking about. The floor plate was so crooked that at the hinge side, it was pressing hard against the wood, causing it to stick up at the clasp side, preventing the clasp from engaging properly. It would just barely engage, and mind you, that was with these shims in place. There was also down the middle, where the middle action screw is, there was a crack in the stock. We took care of that. Let's see, what else? I think that was it. So after we got the stock bedded and free floated, I took it back out to the range. I actually took it along with a bunch of other stuff, and we did some in-depth shooting while we were out there. Now you'll notice this high-speed, low-drag looking camera holder over here. This is something I rigged up for free out of some scrap materials that I had laying around, and utilizing my old cell phone that I broke last year. I dropped it and smashed it, so the screen's all busted up. I used the camera on that, mounted to this with a piece of high-speed Velcro, out at the 100-yard range so that I could get some downrange shots to go along with the video footage at the range. Now, I do have a couple of nice cameras, but this is a public range, and I really don't want somebody shooting my camera down there, so I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, but this is something that will come out in the video that I did before this, and going forward, when I'm doing range work, I'm going to have this out there because it just makes it so much more real when you can see the impacts on paper. So I'm kind of excited that we did that. So yay me. Just kidding. We took it out to the range, and the first shooting that we did with it was actually part of another project, and that was this target here, which all this was shot with this Federal 150 grain power shock ammunition. Now, I chose that ammunition on purpose because consistently in the past, it shot okay through this rifle. Now, that being said, every single one of these groups on here that we shot yesterday is better than anything I had ever gotten out of this rifle before with that ammunition. Now, I've got the numbers written down here. I'll show you the footage, and then we'll kind of cover what we had out of it in terms of group size. The largest group we shot yesterday was 1.32 inches. The smallest group I had ever shot prior to that was 1.4, so we hugged in a little bit, but the average before was 1.8. So we significantly reduced it. The average of these groups is 1.05 inches. The average of these 5 groups is just over 1 minute of angle, and one of them was actually 0.6. So we got some really fantastic groups out of this rifle with the Federal Power Shock ammunition. Now, I went ahead and shot a couple of other types of ammunition through the rifle while I was out there because we had had some bad luck with it in the past. So with the Hornady ELDX ammunition, consistently in the past, I was shooting groups that were over 2 inches at 100 yards with this rifle. I shot 2 groups with it yesterday, and they came out to be 0.95 and 0.126 respectively. So we literally cut the groups in half with that ammunition. There were a couple of the ammunitions that we tried in it that it really didn't seem to make much difference in, but by far and large, we improved significantly. Again, yesterday we fired Winchester PowerPoint 180 grain ammunition. And got a 0.90 inch group. The previous group with that ammunition out of this rifle was 2.52 inches. So I fired a lot of ammunition through this the other day. I didn't go hog wild crazy because Morris sent me a set of his quick detach rings. We're going to be putting them on this rifle very soon, and we're going to be taking it back out to the range to show y'all how those work, and we'll be testing the repeatability of having the scope mounted, shooting a couple of groups, taking it off, putting it back on, and seeing how well it holds the groups and everything else. He also sent me something else for it that's kind of cool, but we're going to save that for the next portion as well. I cannot say enough good things about Morris Milani from Alaskan Arms LLC. That guy is top shelf. Thank you so much for coming out and helping us out with the rifle. Are we done with it as far as fixing what was wrong with it? Maybe not completely. We still have the surface issues, and there's a couple of other things that I want to address with it. Probably eventually I'll wind up putting a Hogue stock on here with the full action bed. But until then, I think we've got this one to the point of where it's going to hold up well enough for us to hunt with it for a couple of seasons and get to know whether or not we really like this rifle. If you sit through all that, thanks so much. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the action job that we have on here. Let me know if you're planning to stick around and watch the review video on the quick detach rings and the other special thing that Morris sent us for the rifle. Let me know down below. Until next time, take care and God bless.